I'm definitely willing to give Brigid Kosgei the benefit of the doubt because she's a growing athlete. She's someone who has had a pretty solid progression. So, you have those the way a natural progression of times works, you have that, big bump when you first gain fitness, and you have little bumps along the way, and then eventually you break through and you have that next big bump. And I think that Brigid Kosgei is probably now on the level of...
I'm here to change the game up. I'm here to shuffle up the deck. You'll probably think I'm famous because I got a blue check.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to tonight's episode of the Running Through podcast. My name, of course, is Justin Horniker, and you're at the hub of all things Justin Horniker running. It was a pretty big weekend. I'm fresh off vacation. That's why this podcast is coming out on a Wednesday instead of over the weekend like I would have liked. But alas, this has given me some time to kind of digest everything and give you my honest take. If my voice sounds a little bit funny, I have a new microphone as well as a new slight sickness. So, without much being said, it's the weekend that changed the sport of running. We had Eliud Kipchoge with his 1:59 experiment breaking the 2-hour barrier. And then you also had, on that Sunday, Brigid Kosgei breaking the women's world marathon record by a hefty margin. So what I want to do today is kind of go through both those results as well as some other notable results from Chicago, and then maybe talk about the larger implications at hand. We also had news that I wasn't able to cover on the last podcast. The Nike Oregon project has been disbanded. So we'll talk about the implications there and how Galen Rupp and Jordan Asay did in Chicago. So without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So the Ineos 159 was a pretty big spectacle in general. So you had the different pacemakers who are runners that everyone knows. You had the laser pacer, which is something that I'm very fond of. Something that, if we're going to be doing exhibitions in the future, my dream now is to see a Kipchoge versus Bekele exhibition like that with the pacers, with the laser chaser, and just kind of see what happens. I think that could be the future of it, is you could have these exhibition races that aren't technically races, but could pit, one or two or three runners against each other while having the different pacing advantages that you had for the Ineos project and the Breaking 2 project. I think it's really cool. It could set up for some really cool events down the road, some game changers, things that we aren't used to, because here's the deal. We talk about all the time with running of how we can get new fans into the sport. How we can get people who aren't usually interested in track and field to be interested in track and field, interested in running. And I was on vacation. I was hanging out with some of my friends from high school, some people that, have a vague understanding of running, some people that used to be cross-country track and field runners, some people who very much were not. And I was able to convince them all to stay up all night and watch this with me. So we were already up that late anyway, because we were doing some drinking things as you do when you're on vacation. But I was able to, once I turned that thing on, I was able to convince them all, and it didn't take much convincing to have them to stay up and watch it with me. And they were all pretty much glued to it until the end. We were doing other things with it on the background, but as soon as Kipchoge got to like the 90-minute mark, everyone was kind of glued to the screen and very intrigued by it, and something that we talked about for the rest of the weekend. So if we're looking at events that can, maybe spur interest in the rest of the sport, this is a good place to break people in. We talk about like what interests people in swimming during the Olympics, and that's, there's always that world record line, so that even if you have no prior knowledge of the sport, you at least know how fast and what relative speed these people are going. So now we look at the, Breaking 2, Ineos 159, whatever, every Eliud Kipchoge exhibition race. And the laser guide is something that I really like. It's something that I think it's more visual for us as fans. Obviously, it helps the runners too, but something that even if in the future they were able to superimpose that. So maybe, think about the first down line of football. If you can superimpose the world record line or the course record line or the pace that they're going for, I think it gives new fans more of a perspective and just something to get into. You also have the added excitement of, wow, this guy's actually going to break 2 hours in the marathon. And then you get to hear about all the things that they couldn't break 2 hours in. But it was a really cool race. If we go into Eliud's splits a little bit, you can see that it wasn't ever really in doubt. At least I don't think it ever was. And his splits are pretty even, as you'd expect from someone with all the paces in the world and a laser guide. But through 5K, he is 14:10 and 28:20, 42:34. So that one's about 4 seconds off. 56:47. So that one's kind of right back in the range. Through 25K, he was at 110:59. I believe he was at 60 even at the half. 30K, he was at 125:11. 35K is at 139.23. 40K is at 153.36. And that's when you know that he was under, but it was maybe going to be close. And then he finished 159.40. So it's not even that he finished under it. He broke the barrier by 20 seconds. And it's just impressive. Like, if you think back to sub 2 and you think back to the closing stretch, and you're like, oh, is he going to get it? It's going to be close. Oh, and then he doesn't end up. He ends up being pretty far behind it to this point where you're like, is he going to get it? It's going to be close. And like, oh, yeah, he's way under by the time he's sprinting towards the finish. So obviously they fixed some things with what happened in the original sub 2. You have a guy who's a 2 flat 39 marathoner under normal circumstances. You throw in pacing, better pacing, you throw in better fueling, you throw in a laser guide, and you throw in maybe updated next percents. But I don't know if the shoes had as much to do with it as people are saying. So looking at some Ross Tucker research and kind of the research out there is that they're saying that the Vaporflies are going to give you anywhere from 90 seconds to 3 minutes of added performance bonus. So if you think of that on the extreme end, if you think that Vaporflies give Eliud Kipchoge 3 minutes of performance bonus, which could be true, but when you factor in everything else that they're doing in this challenge, like especially with fueling and the pacing and just being in the ideal temperature and location, so 3 minutes would put him at 2:02:40. And if you look at Kipchoge's PR before they started all the Vaporfly experiments, like that's gonna line up kind of similarly to that. So you could say that, yeah, he's probably getting more fit. Also, with like the added scrutiny of, okay, this is what we need to do, but you also have the performance bonuses of the new shoe technology, new footwear technology, as well as new pacing techniques and better fueling that I think makes it seem a little more reasonable. It doesn't make this jump seem as unworldly as it seems from the outside point of view. Now, when we get to Brigid Kosgei's run, we can talk about how that seems a little bit outside the realm of human understanding. But I think that Kipchoge's run, I think that Bekele's run in Berlin can be explained by just the advancement in shoe technology and the advancement in what we now understand with what we need to do pacing wise, and that this is the temperature and this is the course that these races have to be run on. I don't think it's like, to me, that isn't out of the realm of possibility. After we talk about Chicago, I want to get into the larger themes here, larger themes at play, and I have a couple Twitter conversations I had that I want to kind of comment. But let's move on to next. We have Brigid Kosgei's run. So Brigid Kosgei breaks Paula Radcliffe's record. Paula Radcliffe's record was thought to originally be untouchable because it was run with the aid of male pacing. It maybe will be a skeptical performance. So let me get into what makes it not so skeptical at first. So Brigid Kosgei is 25. So she's still, in her prime. She still has ways to go as far as what you would think an average progression would be. And if you look at her marathon times, it's not a huge stretch. So in 2015, she would have been 21. She ran 2:47:59. And then you see a huge fitness gain from 2015 and 2016, when she ran 2:24:45. And then 2017, she ran 2:20 in Chicago. And then the perk is that she ran a lot of these races in Chicago. So 2017, she ran 2:20.22. in Chicago. In 2018, she ran 2:18.35, and then this year she has the big jump to 2:14.04. Now, looking at it through that lens, and not through the lens of that she just smashed Paula Radcliffe's world record, is a 4-minute performance bonus too out of the ordinary? At this point, like, maybe. But given the fact that she's running in the same favorite flies that Eliud Kipchoge did, I don't know, man. It seems it could be reasonable. So what makes you skeptical about it? You're skeptical because she's represented by Federica Rosa, who's also represented Rita Jeptu, Jamina Sumyong, and Asbel Kiprop. It just, progression alone shouldn't be a sign of doping, because obviously she still has room to go as far as getting to the prime age for a woman marathoner. But it just sucks that we always have to have this discussion after any race. So Kosgei runs 2:14.04, and some people are excited about it, but I think most of us have a skeptical eye, especially with kind of the past 2 months of what's been going on. Renato Canova had a good thread of just kind of explaining why it's okay to be skeptical, but also like why we should give her the benefit of the doubt. So I'm going to read that. So Renato, I'm going to try to clean this up a little bit too. Basically saying that I don't like the current way to attack the management of Rosa, an indirect or not direct way Nike. Of course, Rosa has had a higher number of doped athletes during the last 4 or 5 years, and some of them were on top of the world. Jamina was Olympic champion. Asbel Kiprop was Olympic and world champion. Rhea Jeptu, winner of several majors. This provides suspicions about the management, but how already I had the opportunity to explain in the past, to look at top management as responsible for doping of the individual is something out of reality. Federica Rosa is the manager, having a higher number of training camp in Kenya. Many of those training camps include 1 or 2 athletes of high level only, plus groups of young runners still at the beginning of their development. Rosa organized camps in the most part of Kenya. Near the 2 main camps, Kapsagat and Kapsabet, there is a historical camp of Kapsait at 3,100 meters altitude where Brigid Kosgei trains, and something in Koreko from which Ruth Chepkegech trains, before moving to Ngong, where they train without any coach following or training. Already in 2012, Federica Rosa had some doubt about some of the athletes at the Kapsabet camp, and decided after speaking with IAAF and WADA to test the athletes of the management before entering them in some marathon. So essentially saying that it's not, you can't blame this all on an agent who represents basically the whole country. Since some tests produced doubtful values, Rosa decided to remove those athletes from the management. But for this action was temporary, banned by Athletic Kenya for a decision of the chairman, Isaiah Kipchoge. So under a logical point of view, management with a lot of top athletes can't voluntarily risk to spoil its image administering doping to the athletes, and this is something valid for all of the top managements, De Madonna, Global, Galazo, Pace, Valera, etc. However, when the athletes are in all the territory, it is not possible to control what they individually do. If there is not a centralized organization, the centralized organization is something that only Global, the company of Josh Herman's, choose. With the 2 main camps in Kapsagat, Patrick Sane and a 10, John Latte, with another camp smaller in Kennerget built around Faith Kipyengon for women and Jeffrey Krui for the men. In the case of centralized organization, it's possible to educate the athletes always living and training in the camp. This is one of the secrets of Eliud Kipchoge, and now of the new athletes in a 10. Eric Kepnumi, Daniel Kipchumba, Joseph Boyd, together with Ronald Klemboy and his younger brother. But when the athletes are alone and the coach look at their training only, they can easily be involved in wrong ideas. In some area, the idea of doping at the base of the training can become dangerous. For example, Rosa was fully confident in the coach at Talam as responsible of the athletes at Kapsabet. Talam is a good coach with good knowledge about training for marathon and psychology, and Rosa was happy with his activity. However, Talam himself was one believing EPO could give a huge advantage and give the substance to his wife, Jem Sumyong, and some other athletes at the camp, without any connection with the management. This is because he wanted to show the ability to produce top athletes to win the Olympics. When there were the hearings against Federica Rosa and Claudio Berdelli, following the allegation of Noah Bensoy, so Rita's husband, the athletes, Rita and Jamina, explained that there was no involvement of coach and manager, and that did everything alone with pathetic and ridiculous excuses full of lies that at the end produced other years' demands. What we can say, knowing the activity in Kenya on the ground, is that for management, it's not possible to control and to know what the athletes can do. If not training camp, the coach is always with them. Against Rosa, there is suspicion from the belly of some people, but the facts are very much different, and IAAF and WADA will know everything. So sign to finish involved management, specifically Rosa in the situation of doping in Kenya. Of course, more athletes management has, the more risk of doping there is, especially in a country like Kenya where there isn't a great control. But we have to remember, in the athletics of today, there are no managers. The athletes never can compete if there are no managers, the athletes can never compete at international level. Also, Athletics Kenya now start an education program with young athletes explaining why no doping for following reasons. It's against ethics, it's dangerous for your health, it's a risk for your career, the effects are very poor or nothing if there's proper training. That's not exactly true. These kind of clinics are in Kenya everywhere, and the level of controls is now very high, probably higher than any other country. I'm still skeptical of that claim. So it's true that in the past, level of controls was poor. The number of out-of-competition tests was high from 2010, but now at the charge of local anti-doping, the federation started a plan moving forward to control its athletes, coaches, and managers who have to show their specific degrees of being authorized to work with Kenyan athletes. There are very wrong ideas about Kenya's situation today. It's better than before writing something not true, full of speculations connected with past problems. The authors can try to know the current reality in a country with very fast evolution. So yeah, that's just a little bit inside knowledge of why maybe it's okay to accept this on face value. However, I think in this day and age that anyone who really follows sport is always going to be skeptical. I'm certainly skeptical, but I'm definitely willing to give Brigid Kosgei the benefit of the doubt because she's a growing athlete. She's someone who has had a pretty solid progression. So, you have those the way a natural progression of times works, you have that, big bump when you first gain fitness, and you have little bumps along the way, and then eventually you break through and you have that next big bump. And I think that Brigid Kosgei is probably now on the level of best in the world and will be best in the world for a long time. So just something to accept, something to, barring a major collapse, this is going to be the future of the women's marathon is Brigid Kosgei. So the larger discussion, what does this marathon breakthrough mean for the sport? So what does Eliud Kipchoge breaking 2 hours? What does Brigid Kosgei breaking Paul Radcliffe's record and saying that she wants an Ineos type level event to see if she can break 2:10? What does that mean for the sport? And I think it's good. In my personal opinion, I think it's great for the sport in that it's bringing eyes that aren't normally there, bringing eyes to the sport that normally wouldn't be paying attention to it. Running was on the front page of newspapers after Eliud Kipchoge broke 2 hours. Barack Obama tweeted at Eliud Kipchoge. It has that mainstream reach that it doesn't usually have. And it's also why I'm kicking myself for not being able to record this podcast sooner. But that is on me and not on media. Are you pro exhibition runs or against it? So I think this is where this and the idea of the shoes being mechanical doping is where a lot of the disconnect is in terms of the current running audience. And I think for one, a lot of people should, generally in a fandom, you don't want to see a lot of change because if you like something, you can see this with fandoms across the spectrum. If you like something, you don't want to see it change too much. And when something comes in that's a groundbreaking thing or a change in idea, it's only natural that people push back on it. So I think about this a lot with, watching hockey and changes in rules and changes in sport being as little as which home and away jerseys they wear get a lot of pushback. And I think in something as, frankly, groundbreaking as what these exhibition runs have been, it's only natural that people are going to see them as some circus show as opposed to actual running. But I think there's a time and a place. I think that we can take a lot of these lessons that we learned from these exhibitions, put them towards major marathons. I think if we treat major marathons more as races, that it's going to have the people who enjoyed these exhibition runs watch the marathon and say, oh, wow, this race is really exciting. These last 5K, they're really going after each other. And then maybe we've now reached a larger audience than we ever have in the past. We have to be able to pivot from these exhibition races back to the actual sport and be able to leverage those new fans that we brought in that have a basic knowledge of the sport and keep their eyes on the sport for longer. I think this is a great way to do it. I think there's also room for these exhibition races to be expanded. So you could have, 3, 4, 5 runners running an exhibition race. So extremely fast times with the help of a pacer, but it's still a race. So, you're still talking last 5K. These guys are running at extremely fast times. They've had all the benefits of what you need to be in this race. And I think that's just another element of the sport that can get more eyes, that can be more exciting. Like, think of a Brigid Kosgei race for the first ever 2 people under 2, or to actually see who's the fastest now that Brigid is 2 seconds slower than the world record. So I myself am pro exhibition runs, but I understand if you're against it. There's a lot of running purists who think that this is a clown show. And I get it, because the first person to actually break 2 in race conditions, whether it be Kipchoge or somebody else, aren't really going to be remembered as much as Eliud Kipchoge is. Now, I actually think that it will be Kipchoge that breaks 2, be it Berlin next year or whenever, but I don't think we're going to have to speculate whether they get the attention or not, because I think it's either going to be Kipchoge or Brigid, and those 2 are going to get all the attention in the world. But I get it. I understand. Okay, so should the shoes be banned? There's a lot of talk of this mechanical performance enhancement. So should shoes that on average give you 90 seconds to 3 minutes of performance bonus be banned? Now, I'm going to go into some tweets where I asked you guys just to give your opinions. But I'm of the belief that we shouldn't be punishing a brand as much as I, at some points, have an anti-Nike bias. Like, we shouldn't be incentivizing against companies trying to find these advancements in shoe technology. I think it's something that we should embrace, and has been embraced. But I get it. However, you have to ask yourself, would there be this much outrage against it if it, 1, wasn't Nike, and 2, if other companies were there? So the fact is that Nike is maybe 1 to 2, maybe 3 years ahead of everybody else in terms of development of these shoes. So maybe in 2 years we aren't talking about this anymore because Saucony, New Balance, and New Balance is almost there. They just don't have a marathoner to test them out yet. Saucony, Jared Ward ran in Saucony's versions of it, and when he ran his 209, I think they're almost there. I think Hoka with the carbon rocket is pretty close. We're just a couple tweaks away. So if you have these the problem is that the top athletes, if you look at worldwide, are Nike and Adidas athletes, and Adidas isn't there. So Adidas sub 2 shoe is, it doesn't have a carbon fiber plate. It's very reliant on the boost material. But if you have these top athletes that could also be Saucony or Hoka or New Balance athletes, I think we wouldn't see as much of a difference. Now, I'd love to see whenever the lab numbers come back between all of these shoes. I think Nike still, because they're kind of ahead on the development process, they probably still have a little bit larger of a bonus. But when you have an athlete like Eliud Kipchoge, who's already running 2:03, you put him in a pair of shoes that's going to give you a 90 to 3 minutes performance bonus, that's going to be noticeable. Now, if he wasn't sponsored by Nike, if he was sponsored by, say, New Balance, which would never happen because they don't have that access to the Kenyan market, that's when we were running into this issue. So I don't think that we should ban these shoes. Now, if it gets to years down the line, maybe we get to Tokyo and there just isn't that comparable technology that maybe we look into it. Or maybe we look into it for the Olympics. The Olympics and World Championships. Make it fair that way, that there is that kind of even playing ground. Kind of like, in swimming where they can't wear the wetsuits for certain competitions, or most competitions now. I can see the case for it. I just don't think that it's the right way of going about it. I think that anything that gets people talking about the sport, talking about these shoes that make you go faster, talking about these race conditions that get eyes on the sport, we aren't in a place to be legislating away from popularity. Would be, and I get it, mechanical doping, right? Like, for a clean sport advocate, it would maybe make sense to also be advocating against physical items that give you that advantage also. But if everyone has that advantage and it's not disadvantageous to your health, like, honestly, these shoes make you more efficient, so they're going to lead to ideally less injuries down the line. Now, not looking at Galen Rupp, who's had a lot of problems since the switch to Vaporfly, but I think there's also some other things going on there that we'll get into. I am of the mindset that I'm not against this at all. Now, I've had some of you kind of give me your perspectives on it, so I'm going to pull up that tweet real quick. So I said, we aren't questioning whether the next percent should be legal if more brands had an equivalent racing shoe that showed similar gains in performance. That's where the disconnect lies. Then Michael Mason DeCroix said, legit question, should that be Nike's problem? Any non-sponsored runner can get them for money. And I said, I still think it should be on the other brands to develop a comparable that is as effective. If not, athletes are at a disadvantage to Nike-sponsored athletes, or they're forced to make less money by not having a shoe sponsor so they can race the Vaporflies. I would think other brands would want to be in the spotlight too, but until then, it's going to look like an unfair advantage, especially when athletes are already locked into contracts that don't have that option. Then Michael said, sure, but I guess I don't see that as the same issue. Hoka came out with its shoe that rivals the Vaporfly this year, and they are just 2 or 3 years behind, which I totally agree with. Adidas is too stuck on the Boost design and doesn't seem to want to change. The New Balance Fuel Cell is a great product, and it's getting pretty close. None are there, and Nike is better at the moment, but alas, I don't think it's fair to punish them for the other companies falling behind. And I forgot to mention that the Adidas attempt at sub 2 shoe for 1 mile using Boost, it wasn't close to as good as Nike. And I agree with all of that sentiment. I think me and Michael are kind of right in line with how we feel about it. And that it's not necessarily Nike's fault that they're a little bit ahead of it. And maybe it is, in that they had this plan for a while and other brands are kind of playing catch up. But that's due to the athletes that Nike already had signed under contracts. Like, it's not, I don't know, I have a hard time wanting to punish them for being the best at the sport right now. And I get it. A lot of people don't like Nike. You don't have to tell me. But I think that this is a little bit out of left field. Now, if we want to go after them for backing Alberto Salazar and Nike Oregon Project for as long as they did, then maybe that's a gripe that we can have. But that being said, this ain't it, Chief. All right, so also on Twitter, I asked you guys, did you love or hate NUS 159? And is Brigid Kosgei for real? Danielle at littlest_D said, loved watching Eliud Kipchoge's run, edge of my seat the whole time. Kind of skeptical of Brigid's new world record, given the longevity of the record and that she broke it by 81 seconds, but I guess it's possible. And then she said, I basically feel how I did about Hassan with her 10K 1500 meter double. I'm skeptical about the likelihood of her performance being clean. And that's fair. I think that obviously Danielle's been listening to the podcast for a while. She knows that I question all these results as well. But it's something that, yeah, I don't think that you can't prove a negative. So you can't prove that somebody isn't doping, So we don't know until they come out dirty, and likelihood that nobody ever will. So there are probably athletes that have records, have medals that have been doping that we just will never know about. Ireland said, as for Kosgei, I'm undecided. There's some murky waters over there that unfortunately, if she's done it on her own, there's a tainted cloud over it. I was surprised at first, but I honestly moved on right away to see how Stephanie Bruce did. And yeah, Stephanie Bruce did awesome. I'll get to that when I want to kind of highlight what some of the Americans did at Chicago here in a second. Simon Murray at Simon Run said, I'd say the 159 was interesting. I just wished other athletes were invited to the party to have a go like last time. If they all failed, it would only serve to highlight Kipchoge's superiority. As for Kage, anyone by nearly 7 minutes will get tongue swag. Absolutely. Ireland also said, love Ineos 159. He gave many people the motivation to do that thing we thought impossible for ourselves. Yes, we know eventually others will do this, but he broke down the wall first to pave the way for others to come next. And then Matt Bush at Matt Bush 71 said, I watched way more running than NFL this weekend and I liked it. So I think that just goes to show like the difference of opinion of those two races. Even though they're both world records, one is more of a triumph of human performance, I guess you could say. But something that I think a lot of people saw coming. So that's why we're not as skeptical of Kipchoge's run as we are of Kosgei's. Kosgei's seemingly came out of nowhere. Everyone's focused on the aftermath of Kipchoge, and now Kosgei has the women's world record that people thought was untouchable. So with that being said, I want to move on to just everyone else's results from Chicago. The Americans had a pretty big day. Overshadowed by all of this is how the Americans maybe had their best day in marathoning ever. So the men had 10 runners in the top 20, 2 in the top 10, as well as 10 runners all under 212. Now, before Jared Ward's run last year, there had only been 3 runners to break 212 in the past 5 years. There are 10 runners this weekend that did it. So Diego Estrada ran 2:11:54 for 19th. Wilkerson Given ran 2:11:44. Noah Droddy ran 2:11:42, and he's really come on as of late. Brendan Gregg ran 2:11:38. Scott Smith ran 2:11:14. So everyone was like bunched together right there too. Matthew McDonald ran 2:11:10. Andrew Bumbleau was up in 12th, ran 2:10:56. Parker Simpson ran 2:10:53. Gerald Mock ran 2:10:36. Jacob Riley, who was the top placing American, ran 2:10:36. And this is all with Galen Rupp dropping out. 10 Americans in the top 20 is unprecedented water for ever. That's like never happened before. On the women's side as well. So on the women's side, you had Emma Bates finishing 4th in 2:25:27. Steph Bruce PRing, finishing 6th in 2:27:47. Lindsay Flanagan, 2:28:08 in 7th. Worth Wiwat, 2:29:06 in 8th. Taylor Ward, 2:30.14 in 10th. So now you have 5 Americans in the top 10. You have Sarah Sellers in 12th running to 31:49, and she keeps getting better as well. Eventually, she's going to be in that 220 mark, and that Boston run isn't going to look like as much of a fluke anymore. Jenna Bergman in 14th, running 2:34:37. Lindsay Anderson in 15th, running 2:35:28. Melissa Schneider running 2:35:31 in 16th. Julia Roman Duvall running 2:35:41 in 17th. Kristen Heckert and Anne-Marie Kirkpatrick running 2:39 and 2:42 respectively in 18th and 19th, rounding out that American contingent. So just a really big day, kind of overshadowed by Kosgei's run, winning by 6 minutes over Yoshina. It's pretty crazy, but Emma Bates really came through. So that's 2:25. The American women will be interesting because you have, I don't know if Shalane's going to be there with how her rehab and everything has been going. You have a couple front runners, and then you just have a large pack at that 2:25 range that could probably go faster or get top 3. I mean, the goal is top 3, so you could see. And then on the men's side, like Galen Rupp will not make the Olympic trials team. I'm going to go out on record right now. I've been told that's a lukewarm take. I feel like that's a hot take. But Galen Rupp will not make the world record team. So you have Scott Fauble, you have Jared Ward, and then who else after that? That third spot's kind of up in the air. Our friend Rob on Twitter said that he wants Noah Droddy to sneak in, and that's very possible. Like you have 10 guys who are there in that 2:10 slot right now. Riley Jacob was only 30 seconds behind Mo Farah. So that gap is slowly but surely closing. It's like all boats rise with the tide, right? So everyone's kind of getting better at the same time, which is going to lead to just a breakthrough in American marathon performance, which is what we've wanted. This is always what we wanted. With the talent in this country, there's no reason that we shouldn't have been able to break 2:12 for the longest time. So this is good. Step in the right direction. I'm loving watching every second of it. Now, that brings us to two notable absences from that list, being Jordan Asay and Galen Rupp, who both dropped out. Nike Oregon Project is no more. There's no more Nike Oregon Project. It has been dissolved by Nike. However, there is still an ongoing appeal by Alberto Salazar, so we'll see how all this goes. But for the time being, all those Nike Oregon Project runners are without a group. I'm sure by the start of the year we'll know. I have been led to believe that there will be another group kind of starting up in its stead. So as Athletic West begat Nike Oregon Project begat whatever this group will be. But they really needed to get out from Alberto Salazar's shadow, and this kind of does it. Now, Galen Rupp was asked about it by Let's Run by Jonathan Galt on the, I guess, is the pre-race breakout, and Galen really didn't want to answer it. So basically saying that he has not had professional contact with Alberto since the news. Now, what does professional contact mean? Who knows? But he did not want to talk about it. So I don't know. I think with all this going on that I'm not sure. Jordan Asay could make the team. Like, if Jordan Asay is just in any sort of shape, she should be a lock for that team. But I just don't know with all this news, everything that's been going on. Obviously, your training is going to be interrupted, if anything, than just mentally. So we'll leave it at that. Here's what I want from you guys this week. What are your predictions for the U.S. trials teams on the men and women's side? I want to see what you guys think. And then maybe we'll have a little prediction contest when it gets a little bit closer. But let me know either in the Twitter comments when I post this show, or in the Instagram comments, or in the show notes themselves. Let me know what you guys think. You can get to me one way or the other. You can also email me, runthroughitpod@gmail.com. You can always reach out to me on Twitter @HornickerJustin, on Instagram @HornickerJustin, and I'll be glad to talk with you guys about anything. I appreciate every single one of you. I hope that this audio sounds a little bit better this week, because I have kind of updated the mic in my editing suite. So we'll see if audio-wise I'm a little more happy with it. But as always, you can always reach out to me about anything, and I'll be glad to talk. In the meantime, hope you guys have some good runs this week. And remember to work hard, be nice. Happy running, guys. We'll talk soon.